The Church of 2021 is at a crossroads. I don't think that's a particularly controversial statement, but hey everyone, welcome to The Creek. My name is Jared Miller and I'm the ministry lead here. After a year like 2020 accelerated the trend lines of decline and missional deceleration that virtually every faith community was already experiencing, the path forward for us isn't clear-cut. We're not really sure if it ever was clear-cut, but for those of us who are involved in church leadership, who've chosen to be involved in church leadership, we want to hope that enough of the old ways people experience church remain in the DNA of our culture, so that at some point we'll be able to return to a degree of normalcy. But I think if we're really honest about it, every single one of us has a ton of doubts about that. We've spent the last year teaching people how to consume church online, showing them a bevy of options and exposing them to different preaching styles and different volunteer options. We've created a virtual sea of content and almost made it impossible to stand out in any kind of meaningful way. Will people come back even if they feel safe to do so? I think our best answer is maybe, but that also means maybe not. Maybe this is the start of something all new. The Russian novelist Fyodor Dostoevsky loved the metaphor of being at a crossroads. He relied on it super heavily in a lot of his novels, particularly though in Crime and Punishment. The idea of having to cross a bridge comes to kind of stand as a tie-in throughout the novel for big choices that characters have to make. Toward the end of the novel, though, comes with, I think, the most on-the-nose example. Sonia says, "Go at once this very minute and stand at the crossroads. Bow down, kiss the earth from which you have defiled, and then bow down to all the world and say, I am a murderer, and God will send you life again. Will you go? Will you go?" Crossroads always beg that question. Which destination do you want to orient your life in, and then will you go? Having been in pastoral ministry for the last decade, that's meant that there's been 10 years that I've spent running a donation-based organization, which means I've spent 10 years trying to get people to say yes to whatever it is that comes next for them. Whether it's the next initiative, the next event, the next program. And the super unspiritual truth of the church is that churches all run on donation. Whether it's donation of time or ability or money, if any of those streams dries up at any point in time, that is it for the church. The truth of the matter is that church is a human enterprise that is deeply fueled by spiritual sustenance. And yet, in those 10 years, I've heard, I think, every single excuse there is for why people don't want to say yes to whatever it is that comes next. There's always hockey practice, or there's a trip that you have to take, or there's jobs that keep us too busy, or we just don't think we could learn this or that or the other thing. But for all the excuses I think I've heard, I think I have a favorite. I know that seems weird to say, but I think hearing just someone say to me, "We've just never done it that way before," is refreshing and honest. Because in church leadership circles, we're told to fear those words, that they're the death knell for the church. But all that they're really saying when they say that is, we don't want to, and we just don't want to come up with an excuse for why. Because if you scratch deep enough into anybody's excuse for saying yes or no to whatever is next in the life of the church, it always boils down to the same thing. We just don't want to. And we don't want to tell you that. I'm a believer that you only need to know two things about a person to really know most of everything about them. Take a look at their bank statement and take a look at their calendar. How a person spends their time and their money will tell you the most important things about that person. They will tell you who that person wants to be. It's why data-driven businesses like Facebook and Google are so wildly successful. They know us in a way that was unheard of a generation ago, and they can show us what we're most likely to prize. They can show us our vision of a good life. In other words, they know our values. They know that everyone has a set of values that they strive to be known for. They're the kind of things that we would want said about us at our funeral. But to a lot of us, what we think we value and how we choose to spend our time and our money do not necessarily match up. So here's a simple exercise if you want to see for yourself. Take a piece of paper right now and write down the 4 most important things to you. 4 things that you would want to be known for if you disappeared tomorrow. These are your categories. Now add a 5th one that we're going to call other or blank or whatever you want to call it. And then go through your calendar line by line, hour by hour, and meeting by meeting, putting each thing that you do in the course of a week or a month or a year into one of those categories. Which one is the biggest? Make a note of how many of the things that you spend your time doing end up in that other category. If you can do the same thing with your credit card statement, and how much does it line up? For most of us, the other category is huge. We spend so much of our time and our energy and our resources doing things that don't actually line up to the values that we say we want to have. So for us here at the Creek, as we started this work of discerning what it is that we're going to put out as our kind of corporate value statement, getting them right really mattered to us. We wanted these things that could be equally true of us as a community, but also of a geographical body of water like a creek. Ultimately, where we settled was 4 kind of key value statements for us as the Creek. These are things that we'd want said about us when we were gone, but they're also our promise to you watching this as a community of faith about how we're going to spend our time, our money, and our abilities. First, gentleness. We want the Creek to be a place for everyone. The thing about creeks is that they're not rivers. They don't rage, they don't have rapids. You don't bowl people over with a creek. As a group, we never wanted to be identified by the things that we're against. We'd much rather be identified by the things that we're for. We want to be a community that promotes hope and joy and peace and love, and seeks to find ways to bring more of these things into our neighborhoods in a secular age. We want to hold a generous orthodoxy, sure, but we want to adopt an ethic at the end of the day that says, as much as it's up to me, I want to be at peace with all people. Second, complexity. We contain multitudes. The thing about a creek is that it doesn't follow a straight path. A creek isn't defined by its efficiency or really its productivity in getting from point A to B. Creeks wind and bend and take their time getting where they're going. They're complex organisms. We believe that certainty is kind of the antithesis of our faith, and that simplicity is the ally of certainty. If I can be understood simply and categorically, I can be dismissed. But the more complex I am, the more I contain multitudes, even the more I contain contradictions, then the work of understanding me is never going to be complete. Complexity might beget doubt of a kind, but we see that as fertile ground for vibrant, real faith. Third, presence. Really being seen and really being known. The thing about a creek is that you can't miss it. It's not aggressive. It doesn't force itself on people. If a creek floods, it's not really the end of the world for very many things. But it never starts and stops. It's a fixture in the geography of a place sometimes that means that a bridge over it has to be built, but sometimes that means that diversions around it need to be planned. In any case that you frame it, a creek is by definition a presence. We don't want to be a community of wallflower. We want to be contended with by our neighborhoods and our neighbors. We want to be a fixture in South Calgary that simply isn't going anywhere, that is as much a part of it as the creek that runs from east to west is. Finally, grace. The creek is not about making you or anyone else into something that you're not. A creek really isn't a place where people go to swim. It isn't a place where people bathe. It's a place where people gather. When they pack a picnic and sit down with family and friends, it's about belonging. But But the nature of belonging is that it changes the way you behave. But the nature of belonging is that it changes how you behave. It's hard to be an angry person if you're spending all of your time sitting by a bubbling creek, gently whispering into your ear, "You belong here." Belonging necessarily changes how you behave, and then that behavior changes what you believe. The Creek's process is about ultimately helping people build habits of grace among overprogrammed and overwhelmed families in South Calgary. That's who our neighbors are by and large. It's about finding everyday grace in the middle of suburban sprawl and strip malls. It's about belonging our way into belief in a secular age. The best way to find out about the values of the Creek, though, is to join us for afterwards. If you hit up thecreek.life/afterwards, there's a link on the screen here. You can find a full gathering of all of the afterwards happenings going on around our city. And then make sure you download the app to stay on top of everything else that's happening here at the Creek. In any case, for now, those are the things that we value. Those are where we are going to put our time, our energy, and our ability. Take care of yourselves and take care of each other. We will talk to you soon. All the best. Cheers.